How's it going, everybody? It seems like the cultural civil war might be coming to a boil. I don't know how else to explain it, but you know, this is a concept I've talked about a little bit over the past several videos and in videos in the past, but the general idea is that the cultural civil war, it's some phenomenon that's happening. It's not necessarily left versus right. It's not necessarily authoritarian versus libertarian. These things are there. It may be anti-establishment versus establishment, but the short answer is it's not so simple. One thing we know that it's happening, right? Whether it's pro-Trump versus anti-Trump, left versus right, authoritarian, libertarian, there's some kind of conflict happening between two large groups that break down into smaller subgroups. Now, cultural civil war isn't something that I've come up with. It's something that I've actually heard from progressive activists, how they refer to it. And we've seen a lot of turmoil. We've seen street battles. We've seen violence. We've seen bike locks being bashed over people's heads. And so it's safe to say that there is some kind of cultural conflict going on. But the reason that I say that it's coming to a boil is that just the other day, Jake Tapper was called a white nationalist for criticizing Linda Sarsour. So Linda Sarsour is the Muslim feminist activist, one of the organizers of the Women's March. Jake Tapper, a CNN personality with over 1 million followers, and he criticized some of Linda Sarsour's rhetoric. She responded by saying that he had joined the ranks of the alt-right to criticize her. Well, I don't know if she actually intended to call him a white nationalist, but if she didn't, it would mean that she doesn't know what alt-right means. There is a trend, I suppose, amongst the left to label everyone alt-right simply for disagreeing with them. We've seen it in the case of Dave Rubin, who I talk about all the time because he is one of the biggest targets of being called alt-right. It's happened to me. I'm like center-left libertarian, grew up in the south side of Chicago, anarcho-punk dude, skateboarder, and they're calling me alt-right, which literally means white nationalist. And don't take my word for it. Wikipedia defines alt-right as having white nationalism as its core tenet. In which case, these people on the left labeling everyone a white nationalist is just absolutely wrong. As soon as I saw this tweet from Linda Sarsour, I immediately started humming that song from Chris Ray Gun, you know, where everyone who doesn't think the way I do is obviously just a Nazi. This is what's been happening. The left says, you criticize me, you must be alt-right. You must be a white nationalist. And Jake Tapper, I would bet a lot of money, is not a white nationalist. In fact, I would assume Jake Tapper is a fairly liberal guy. But this is the kind of crazy boiling point that we're seeing. It's not just about Linda Sarsour calling Jake Tapper alt-right, but it's about seeing a mainstream personality like Jake Tapper criticize Linda Sarsour. You know, Linda Sarsour is someone who has, to a certain degree, advocated Sharia law in the US. And that is shocking to a lot of people. I would say that it's not within what is socially acceptable. But what is socially acceptable is not being challenged by the left. There are many things done by the left that have not been called out. And it's pretty damn shocking. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a friend and I asked them, do you know about the bike lock basher? This is the guy Eric Clanton who took a bike lock and bashed 7 people over the head. And they all say no. But when I ask them about the Portland stabber, got off the train, was yelling at the Muslim women, of course they've heard about it. The media didn't immediately write about Eric Clanton and the things he was doing. They did write stories about Eric Clanton, but it was the stories I found were mostly about 4chan tracking him down. When the Portland killings happened, it was almost national news and everyone was talking about it. Because for whatever reason, the left won't criticize its own. Now, we've seen people on the alt-light and the alt-right fighting with each other because people in the alt-light are critical of some of the ideas and racial connotations that are within the alt-right. The alt-right is essentially white nationalist, and there are people who are conservative who don't like white nationalism, and so they have conflict. And both sides criticize each other. And that's a good thing, because there needs to be checks and balances for the more extreme ideas in any faction, and people should be working to figure out what is and is not socially acceptable. But among the left, this doesn't seem to be happening. And now, I'm fascinated to see Jake Tapper actually calling out Linda Sarsour. There are a lot of left-leaning personalities, left-leaning individuals who are becoming critical of this far-left, hard-left, you know, SJW, whatever you want to call it, mentality, ideology. And we've seen Lacey Green recently. Many of you know who she is. She's a YouTube feminist and personality who recently came out to open dialogues with the anti-SJWs, and she got huge backlash for it. They're calling her a Nazi now. But Dave Rubin, you know, liberal, myself, center-left, libertarian kind of guy, liberal, We see Bill Maher. There's more and more people who are on the left who are standing up and saying, you know what, these people on the left should not represent what the left is because they're extremists. With all of this crazy fighting and people who are liberal being called far right, people have asked me, why are you only criticizing these people? Why don't you criticize Donald Trump? And I think to a certain degree that's fair. There's absolutely a ton of stuff to criticize Trump about. But I can only talk about so much, and there's only so much I'm focused on. And I feel like when people are fighting in the streets and when speech is being silenced, we can't solve any problems, even problems with Donald Trump or any other politician, until we're able to have a dialogue. Now, when I tweeted that you should not disavow your friends for being Trump supporters, I got criticized by left-leaning activists or establishment activists. Like, I don't even know how you describe these people, because they're not necessarily left-leaning, but they're in support of is it authoritarian maybe? Too many people associated with the far left are against speech. You know, for instance, when I was in San Bernardino at the anti-Sharia protest, the counter-protesters, the left, actually said over the bullhorn, if any of these people, the Trump supporters, try to speak to you, chant them down and do not listen. And that's just crazy. I could sit here all day and complain about policy and the president and, you know, other political issues, foreign affairs, and I do that sometimes. But what really matters to me, I think, is first and foremost media, because this is where people get their information. So you'll see me doing a lot of media criticism, but talking about and calling out this extremist behavior from, I guess you'd call it the hard left or whatever, is also important, because they're the ones who tend to be saying no conversations and no speech. They're the ones who just call anybody who criticizes them a white nationalist. They're the ones who use large blockchains on Twitter where they'll block anybody. John Cusack, the actor, has downloaded a dragnet where he's blocked tons of people, many of his fans, simply because they may have been thinking the wrong thing. You know, there are activists, there are feminists, there are social justice, whatever you want to call it. There are people online who collect the names of people they disagree with and put them on a block list, and they all share it. There are people I've never interacted with who don't interact with me in any way, who blocked me simply because they downloaded a list that I'm on. This is dangerous because it's going to create extreme political factions who plug their ears and go la 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 instead of actually talking about how we can solve our problems. And if we can't talk about it, we can't solve anything. We can't stop the violence. We can't fix the problems in our government. We can't end foreign wars. All of these things that people on the left want cannot be accomplished if they refuse to communicate. And so I want to clarify, last point, is that I don't mean the entire left. I literally was hanging out with my left-leaning friend the other day, who I would say is a city-dwelling progressive, and we were in total agreement that there are vocal minorities within the left that are just too extreme, and it's stopping conversations. To reiterate for the 1 billionth time, I'm not alt-right. I'm not right-wing in any way. I took the goddamn political compass test, and I'm on the left. And I think it's time that people on the left criticize the more extreme rhetoric coming from the left, because we need to solve our problems. I don't like doing such hard opinion videos, but seeing Jake Tapper called a white nationalist was like a straw on a camel's back for me. Come on, man. Jake Tapper is CNN? This is ridiculous. But let me know what you think. Comment below, because it just feels like, man, this cultural civil war might be coming to a crux or something. If you like the video, click the like button. I'm actually on a plane right now to Chicago, and there's some stories there, some some journalist stuff I'll be looking into, but I don't want to get too much into it for security reasons. But stay tuned, new videos every day at 4 p.m. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Timcast. If you want to help support the work that I do, go to patreon.com/Timcast. Give whatever you'd like, give nothing at all. My videos will always be free and available every single day. You know, this stuff, it sometimes gets really, really exhausting. And I try as much as possible to actually just do interesting travel and on-the-ground news reporting, but it's not always so simple, and there's not always a big breaking news story to track down. So rest assured, You know, when the big breaking news stuff happens, I will do my best to be there on the ground, whether it's a wildfire or a riot. But in the meantime, I'm going to look at the pressing issues of the U.S., and I think our cultural civil war might be just that. And I think it's important to say, if there is anything that I'm active about in any way, if you could call me an activist, it's simply for rationality and open dialogue. I don't know what policies are the right policies. I don't know, you know, what the president should or should not be doing, because I'm not a politician. But what I do know is that if we don't allow speech and conversations, we'll never solve anything. Hopefully, if I could be called active or opinionated in any way, it's just for calm, rational dialogue. Please. See you tomorrow.